hi there. I got 17 lovely subscribers from my first video, so I thought, why not do another diorama? And as I was looking around to find a diorama to craft, I stumbled around this greenhouse. More importantly, if you go all the way to the back of the greenhouse, you will find this underground thing. It's a lovely little space, and I definitely wanted to craft this one, including this chest, of course, which I can't open. So let's start with the tree, and if you ask me for a reason why the tree is the first one, I don't have one. Anyway, trees are simple as far as I understand, and sure enough, I made my first mistake at the very first build. I chose very stiff steel wire instead of soft aluminium wires that most crafters would gravitate towards. Nonetheless, the idea is the same and is rather simple. You just twist the wires and then form them into branches. I tried to go a little bit extra with this one and added tiny little bits of wires to simulate some sort of a smaller branches. With the skeleton completed, I'll use polymer clay and bulk up the tree from here on out. Now, the camera might make it look like I'm pretty good at sculpting, but frankly I am not, and I'm just winging it at this point. And to sell the effect even further and make myself look like a professional, I'll use fancy little tools and pretend I'm doing something intelligent, which I'm not really. After baking it hard solid, I want to work on these flexible parts, and they need to be flexible, so I will use this technique of using PVA glue. Now I learned this technique from Marklund of Sweden, a YouTube channel, and you can check him out, and I just want to give him a huge shout out. Well, it's more of a squeak at this point because I don't really have a lot of viewers, but hey. Anyway, the strategy here is that you would apply PVA glue and then sprinkle some sand over it. You would then repeat this process once the PVA glue sets and then build up the tree in layers. But once you're done, I think the results are really good and it looks almost like real bark. Now let's not forget the rest of the stem here, and I'll use some of the crumpled air drying clay, which is a leftover that I had from my Hufflepuff common room diorama. Now in the Hogwarts Legacy game, it has a bit of a green color, and I try to match the color as much as I can here and building it upon layers after layer. And I struggle to paint here because my airbrush is dirt cheap, and I got this free when I bought the compressor. It splatters paint all over, so I had to resort to paintbrush elsewhere later on, and then finally it looks pretty convincing. Now the tree inside the greenhouse of Hogwarts Legacy has something going on here, and to create this effect I think I'll stick with resin. To do that, I borrowed some pebbles from my lovely succulents and then just dumped them here. And with that, it's time for some vlog. Hello there people, what a lovely day here. No, we don't do that here. Anyway, safety first, and I have mixed 2-part epoxy here, and this is my first time using epoxy resin as well. And the idea here is that you have to whip it until it's all clear. And from then on, I will add some of these blue fluorescent dust and then just whip it into the resin. Once I was about to pour it, I realized that there was way too much bubbles in it. I think I whipped it a bit wrong or maybe too vigorously, but hopefully the bubbles clear out eventually, and let's see how it turns out. Alright, once the resin has cured, the bubbles are clearly visible there, and although it's not as much as I thought, so I'm pretty happy with that. And pulling this thing out of the silicone mold was much more difficult than most YouTube channels seem to do it. Maybe I'm just not good at it. But anyway, now to make the leaves of the tree, I needed a very special material which I procured through some means. This pillow contains the material that I need. All I need to do is get a little bit of it. But it's too white for the tree, so I will need to dye it. In this case, I'll use a highly thinned brown color and soak it into the polyfibers. Once the polyfiber dries, it's all a matter of stretching it onto very thin layers and draping it all over the branches. Once it's all been draped, I will trim off some of the excess dangly bits And the idea here is rather simple. You just grab some of these leafy textures that you can buy from any hobby store, and then using a brush, I will gently dab it with some PVA glue. Once that's done, again, just like with the branches, I'll sprinkle some of these leaves onto it. This polyfiber mesh allows the leaves to stick on it, making it look like a bush instead of just simply being stuck on twigs. Repeat the process layer after layer and you get a convincing looking tree. And again, this is also a technique that I learned from Marklund of Sweden, so you should check him out and learn some stuff too. I myself learned quite a lot from him. Well, now that the tree is done, let's start working on the actual diorama. I think I'll start with the basement here, and for that, I'll use a very thick foam core board and sketch out the dimensions of my structure here. Now, in this case, I decided to be very accurate with my measurements because the greenhouse is a lot of steel work and window work. For that, I want to make my task much simpler, so the best way to do it is to get every measurement accurate. After getting a pretty decent layout of the structure, I'll make a hole for the whole tree to fall into and start working on the actual basement. For that, I've created these walls and I've used the same technique as I did in my Hufflepuff diorama. But sadly, I didn't press the record button and I have no footage of it, but either way, I will be using the same technique when I make the floor later on, so you will get to see it there as well. Going back to the basement, however, though, making the wall as one section and cutting it up into pieces meant that the task was a much simpler process. And to create the other complex artwork, I just decided to stick with clay here. For that, I will use a transparent PET sheet and then wrap it around the hole. This way the hole stays the same shape as my tree resin. And for today's diorama, I decided to use 𝚜𝚌𝚔𝚎 as my air drying clay. If you ask me why I don't choose dust clay, that's because I ran out of it, and secondly, I want to try new things so that I can know which one's better. Now the 𝚜𝚌𝚔𝚎 air drying clay is actually rather good. It's pretty firm, it holds the textures really well, and it's pretty comfortable to sculpt with because these type of air drying clay has some sort of fiber to it. It's not exactly clay. And one of the things I found with 𝚜𝚌𝚔𝚎 clay is that it's less fibrous than dust clay, which made it easier to sculpt finer detail. But there's a big problem. The dust clay sticks well to itself, so I can build it up layer after layer quite easily. But with 𝚜𝚌𝚔𝚎, I had to apply a layer of water and then stick it onto that. It was very difficult to get it to stick together, so maybe my clay is just a bit old and dry, but I don't know. I definitely think I would prefer dust clay over this. Enough rant about clays. The diorama is rather simple here. It's just a matter of putting in the clay and sculpting it to look like brickwork. The other advantage of using a clear plastic sheet here is because I can draw the window frame on top of this and not have to worry about getting the whole dimensions correct. I can just draw it here and I'll just cut it out later on and make the design out of it. In my first attempt, I tried to use very thin balsa wood, but it looked terrible, so I decided to go with this flexible PVC material. This was obviously much more difficult to cut through, but the overall finish was much better. After giving it yet another sloppy paint job, it's time to do this chest here. To make the chest, I'll use polymer clay, and I don't have the necessary skill set to make a detailed chest here. The best I can do is add a blob to make it look like an eyeball and then squiggle some lines, hoping it ends up looking like a good chest. But ultimately, I think the chest turned out rather well. With that done, let's focus our attention on these massive mushrooms. To do that, I will use the same clay from before. This is the translucent air drying clay. I'll just take a thin jewelry wire and simply roll the air drying clay over it to form the stem of the mushroom. To make the tip of the mushroom, I have no idea what it's called. I'll just flange it out with a sculpting tool and then stick it onto the stem. And there you go. It's a very lovely looking mushroom. To make the bigger ones, it's pretty much the same story. It's just that it'll be a lot bigger. With these big mushrooms though, I'll go an extra step and sort of mush out the edges to be a very thin one. I don't know, looks pretty good to me. I don't think I'll make more than 3 or 4 mushrooms, and I'll just stick them onto my basement. It's unfortunate that these mushrooms were rather bulky and is hiding my chest there, but oh well, that's that. The translucent mushroom looks okay, and I don't think it needs a layer of paint or anything. Perhaps I'll just touch it up with some fluorescent paint later on, but I think it should be okay. Now in the basement there's also these weird dangly roots coming from the ceiling. So to do that I chose some dried lichen moss, that's what they are called. I've dyed them into a darker green shade, and I'll just stick them into appropriate places. And I think with that the basement is completed. Now let's focus on the top part, and as you can see, making the floor tiles is rather gruesome. And this is why I forgot to record it earlier. But once I'm through with it, I'll give it a coat of stone grey color and apply a black wash. With that done, I'll flip the whole thing over and stick this bottom floor. Now I realized that the front edges were a bit boring, so I cut out some of the stone blocks and make it look like it were crumbling away as well. And I'll also apply some green swatches to make room for the next item, grass flocks. And this is my first time trying to do any sort of grass flocking, and so I bought one of the cheapest grass flocking applicator. And since all my knowledge is about me watching YouTube videos, so I will do a test project here, and immediately I realized that the grass is sticking to everything. So I put on some gloves before I kill myself. After that, I think the concept is rather simple here. You just shove in some of the grass flocks, and then using the applicator, I will spread it across the PVA glue. Now, one of the things I've learned during my test sample is that I shouldn't shake the applicator too vigorously, and I should rely on the static electricity to pull the glass flocks down straight. So now that I've learned some expert knowledge, I will mask some of the holes on the floor and then apply PVA glue. Another thing I've learned is that the layer of PVA glue shouldn't be too thick, or else the grass tends to fall down when it's stuck to it. The layer has to be thin enough so that the grass can stand, but not too thick that it falls off later. For my grass, I'm using a bit of green color, slightly darker green color as well, and, well, something that's not green. I'll mix them all up and then sprinkle them using electricity. As you can see, this time I'm trying not to shake it too much and instead rely on the electricity to pull it down. Now that that's done, I'll peel off the masking tapes and start working on the flowers. To make the flowers is essentially the same as me making mosses for my 𝚜𝚑𝚅𝚔𝚎 diorama. I'll put blobs of PVA glue and apply grass flocks onto them. This way I get tiny individual little blobs of bushes, just like that. Once that's done, to make the flowers, most crafters online would gravitate towards using foam as the flower. But I came across this channel, 𝚜𝚒𝚔𝚋𝚔 Dioramas and Model, is a YouTube channel as well, and he used crayons to make the flower bits. The advantage of this being that you can pretty much get any color of flower you want. But it was very difficult to work with, not to mention it gets stuck on everything. To make the comparison for myself, I have a bit of pink flower here as well, and this is made out of foam, not crayons. Eventually I felt that the foam flower textures were much easier to work with, and frankly I think it looks better than the crayons as well. Anyway, I made a bunch of it, and I will work on these flower bushes. To create this I need a wireframe. It's pretty much the same process as I did with the tree. It's just a lot simpler to make, and it doesn't take much time, as you can see just from this short clip. But once that's done, I'll give the branches a darker green color, and I chose to go with golden wire, mainly because even if I miss a spot, the gold color comes off as dry wood and not look like silvery tree, which really doesn't exist anywhere. Anyway, I'll just apply a bit of PVA glue on the tips and just dab it onto my foamy texture. For some of the larger bushes, I don't really have the color that I need for this tree, but I just decided to go with a green one. Now that that's done, let's make these benches that these dudes are sitting on. And for this one, I decided to try basswood instead of balsa wood. Now, basswood is actually rather hard comparing to balsa wood, and there's a lot of advantages to it. It can be made thin and you can work with delicate little structures like this one. I think working with it was such a fun experience, and I slightly prefer basswood over balsa wood now. It's just that they're a lot more expensive than balsa wood where I am. But I'll definitely keep basswood as some of my crafting material in the future. Now that it's done, I'll give it a stony looking paint job and just stick all this into the diorama along with the other flowers. Once the flowers and benches have been put into place, before I put on the bigger plants, I want to put this tree in. And sliding this tree should be rather easy because I measured it accurately. Once the tree is in place, I'll drill holes for the flowery bushes and then stick them onto the floor. Now before I start working on the wall, let's work on this lamp and this one upstairs as well, but I think I'll start with the ones upstairs. To do that, I'll use the same LED, the fairy light. For this one, instead of twisting it loosely like I did in the Hufflepuff diorama, I will twist them rather tightly to form almost like a very thin and sturdy chain. After that, I'll cut out a strip plastic sheet and drill a hole in there. Then slide the LED onto the back. This forms the back for the lamps, and I will use UV resin to create the lamp. It's just that I have a tiny little problem. I have these UV torches called black light torches, and they were completely useless because the UV resin wouldn't dry. After so many attempts, I got sick of it and I splurged some money on this massive UV lamp. This UV lamp isn't just stronger and more powerful, it also operates on a 405 nanometer wavelength, which is the same thing that 3D resin printers use, as opposed to the torchlight, which is just 395, and supposedly 405 is better for this purpose. Anyway, I will apply some of these UV resins and then blast it with my powerful new lamp. I'll repeat this process and simply build up the bulk of the lamp. After that, it's a matter of sanding it down to the oddly shaped hexagonal lamp shape, and then to top it off, I will steal some of this tubing from my spray bottle and then slide it onto the back. Let's just say it's not that easy to work with, but once I've stuck it to the lamp, I'll give it some paint job and I think it looks pretty convincing. For the floor lamps, it's pretty much the same process, but to make the post for this floor lamp, I needed a sturdy shaft that would be long and straight. I couldn't find anything until I stumbled upon my WD-40. I'll steal this nozzle from this and cut out 2 sections to make the hollow shaft for my lamp. After cutting out what I needed, I still had a bit of it left, so I stuck the small bits back to the WD-40. Remember boys, length isn't always important. To build up the designs on the lamp, I will use masking tape and just roll it over the shaft. Once that's done, I will add in tiny little bits of plastic on the sides as well to make it look like the real thing. And to make these decorative metal work, I will use these cute little hearts that I got somewhere. The way I'll do it is to stick them onto a double-sided tape, cut them into half, grab half of the piece, and then stick it onto the side of this plastic tube. It's not exactly the same design, but I think from a distance it's pretty convincing. With the lamp post complete, I'll just slide in the LED. Now I'll give you the paint job off camera and lamps are completed. Now you might be wondering why I'm doing a lot of paint work off camera, and that's because I don't have a fume hood and I don't want to die breathing in paint, so I'm doing a lot of the work outdoors. Anyway, now that the lamps are in place, let's focus on this drainage. The drainage has a weird dragon snake thing that's wiggling around it. So I'll just try to mimic the design pattern on it, which was obnoxiously confusing. And then I'll cut out the pattern onto a strip of balsa wood. And after a sloppy paint job, I'll just slide it into the diorama. This pretty much completes the whole ground floor of the greenhouse, and the greenhouse in Hogwarts Legacy is a very complex structure. And while on the face of it looks simple, from a construction point of view, it's actually more difficult than the other projects. So much of my structure will be built using thin foam core boards. And I will try to get the measurements as accurate as humanly possible. This is to ensure that ideally all my glass window panes were to remain the exactly same size. Now to make the frame for my window panes, I tried a test sample using balsa wood, but it didn't look pretty at all. So I went ahead and got some of these ABS plastic sheets. Now these are the sort of material that Gundam fans would be using, and there are several key advantages to it. First of all, it's pretty thin and still maintains some rigidity. And the second of it is that it sticks really well with CA glue, and this is a bonus for me because I don't really have a lot of time working with other types of glue. In my first video, I enjoyed using balsa wood to make a lot of the finer details, but having to get my hands on these ABS plastic sheets, I think I will use more of them in the future. They were so fun to work with and I can trust them. The stair is also very simple. I'll just stick some of these thicker ABS plastic sheets onto foam core boards, and I'm not really concerned about having the decorative part of it. I'll also make the roof in a separate section and essentially follow the same dimensions of the wall. With the main framework complete, I want to start working on these railings, and for this I needed to find a method that I could repeat and make my life much easier. So I tried creating molds out of plaster and using polymer clay on it, but it just wasn't working. I even tried cutting it out of cardboard, but it didn't look nice at all. I've also tried flexible polymer clay, but it was simply too flexible. And then later I tried using a thicker design, but it also crumbles when I tried to use polymer clay. So at the end, I decided to go with silicone molds. For this, I will create a cast of plaster. Once the plaster has started to harden and not fully dry, I will draw in the design for the railing. And instead of carving out the design to make a mold, I will carve out the actual railing so that it serves as the subject for my mold. I just have to be really careful not to nick any part of the edges and ruin it, which would mean that I would have to start all over again. But once I have created some of the design facades that I need, I will use silicone putty to create my mold. Now this is silicone putty, I'm not using liquid silicone, and this is very convenient to use. I just mix 2 equal parts of this white and blue silicone gel and then mix them up all together. And I've got to tell you, my experience with this silicone putty was that it's so smooth and squishy, almost to the point that I wanted to eat it. Anyway, after playing with it for a while, the idea here is that I will gently press it onto the design, making sure that I get all the air out and get the whole details. It doesn't take long to dry, and actually takes about 10 minutes for it to harden or stiffen up, and then I'll gently peel it off the plaster. And just like that, I have a working mold which is flexible and easy to peel off. To make my railings, I will use UV resin. I'll gently pour them onto my mold, making sure to get every nook and cranny. After that, I'll blast it with UV lights. But I need to make a lot of this, and I didn't want to blast these powerful UV lamps all over the place. So I got myself these cardboard box, and I'll make a cutout for my UV lamp where it can sit in. After making a decent hole for the light to shine through, I'll slide in my mold with the UV resin in it, and then place my UV lamp over it. Once the UV cures, it only takes about a minute or 2. It's about just pulling it off. But I soon realized that even though the molds are great, it's not exactly smooth. And I ended up having to do a lot of sanding, which in retrospect I should have been more careful using resin dust. I have no idea how dangerous or toxic these are, but my hands paid the price for it. But after several days of sanding and casting, I have the railings completed, and it's all a matter of sticking them onto my foam core boards. Now, some of you might be wondering why I'm going through such lengths and not just print it using a 3D printer, and that's because that wouldn't be crafting now, would it? It's a bit like asking a painter to paint using a printer. It doesn't really make sense. You're not really painting anymore. Anyway, it's not that I hate those tools, I just want to enjoy the process of crafting manually. And one of the things I've learned working with resin is that UV resin is very easy to work with. It cures really quickly and it doesn't end up with many bubbles in it. And the other advantages is that if you want to reshape it after it cures, you can simply use a hot torch and it makes it soft and pliable, and you can bend it and correct your shapes, which is exactly what I did for this bridge in the diorama. The railings were curved and I simply blasted it with some hot air, and it's easily malleable and curves to the shape I want. With all the railings and designs in place, it's time to paint the whole thing. Now again, I'll be doing a lot of my airbrushing outdoors, but I just wanted to highlight what I'm doing. I'll start off with a dark green course, and then apply a lighter green, and then finish up with some rusty color. Once the paint has been completed, I need to make the window panes. To make my window panes, I decided to use these flexible plastic sheets. Now these are covers you would occasionally come across as folder covers for your documents, but I liked the texture of it and I think I'll use them for my window panes. Making the window panes is pretty simple for me because all my dimensions are accurate, so I just need to cut them out into pieces and stick them onto a cardboard. After that, I will spray paint them. To create the look of algae or moss growing on it, I'm using a sponge here and dabbing it to create the effect of algae growing on dripping water. I think that's what it looks like to me. After spending several hours spray painting it and drawing some lines to make it look like the smaller window frames, I can start putting the whole thing together. It's a matter of just snapping them into position. Putting all of these things together was very fun. So fun, in fact, I forgot so many things, like this bridge, or this flower, or this tree. So I ended up cracking one side of the wall off so that I can install the missing pieces. To make these hanging flower pots on the railing, I'm using balsa wood because it's softer for me to carve out a hole in it to make it look like a pot. After giving it a green paint job, I will stick some of the leftover grassy flowers. There's also this overgrown viney vegetation on the railings and other parts of the wall, so that's what I will do. I didn't know the name of this material in my previous diorama, and apparently they are called polyfiber mesh. So if you want to search for it, that's the word you want to search for. Unfortunately, because I had ripped off the wall from its original position, the walls are no longer straight. For the roofs, I will drill some holes onto the roof and slide in my lamp. And upon fitting the whole thing together, the walls and the roof look pretty okay, except the tree, which is massive. And if you remember, that's the one thing I didn't measure, but I can't really fix that now, so let's just fix some lights. I have this broken fairy light as well, which I will stick all around on the outside. This would make it look like sunlight shining through the window pane. After sticking all the lamps onto place, making it look like what I can only describe as a scary Christmas tree, all the lamps are lighting up perfectly. After wiring them up, I will drill a hole onto the base and slide them where the switches and power sources will be. I've also stuck 2 blue LEDs onto the resin. I'll then tidy up all these dangly cables, add some switches, which looks almost like a spaceship control panel, and then slide it into position. Now my diorama is almost pretty much complete at this point, but the light wasn't shining through as strong as I wanted it to, so I decided to add this structure around the LED lamps. My thought was that I would wrap aluminium foil around this, and the theory would be that the aluminium foil would reflect some of this light and make it brighter. I'm not sure if it did any help, but I think the problem lied in me painting the window panes too dark and not necessarily how strong the lights were. Anyway, that's my diorama completed, and what I want to do now is shove this whole thing into a set of Harry Potter books. Now, buying a whole set of Harry Potter books and chopping them up isn't exactly a good idea, so I'll make my very own fake Harry Potter books. To make the books, it's pretty simple, and I don't really have a lot of footage here, mainly because making books isn't all that difficult, and secondly, my workplace isn't suited for working with large pieces of paper. And I had to make these books outside in my dining table. So if you want to see a more in-depth version of how I make these fake books, let me know and I can follow it up, but for now I simply didn't have the space to do it. What I can show you is how I made the fake paper edges, and I've tried several techniques and tried to make it look as realistic as possible, and ultimately I came up with one that looks pretty convincing. For that I'll just use balsa wood and then paint some yellow-white paint onto the wood. And once the paint dries, I'll give it some scratches with a steel brush. And I think it looks pretty realistic. After that, I'll just stick the edges of the wood onto the fake book cover. And that looks almost like an actual book. But I got sick of it and bought these old books. No, I'm just kidding. These are all the fake books that I made, and they are hollow. This is where the diorama will fit into. I've tried to get the thickness of the book as accurate as I can. In Harry Potter series, the books 1, 2 and 3 are rather thin, and they seem to get progressively thicker as the story goes on. I don't know why, because I'm not J.K. Rowling. Now for the front, I want it to look like a part of the book is still intact, so I will use a bit of wood and stick it into the inside as well. And for the covers, I have a cutout for the whole diorama, and it's pretty simple, so it's just a matter of cutting it out and it should fit perfectly well. As for the decorations and labels on the book cover, I seriously need space to draw this, so I'll do it off camera. But here I can show you some of my sample test artwork. There's no science or idea behind it, I just thought that it's a greenhouse, so why not have some flowers to go along with it. And in the end I decided to change the floral design on the top and make it look like the floating candles in the Great Hall in Harry Potter. As for the paint I am using an acrylic marker. This is again the sort of thing that Gundam fans would be using, and they are surprisingly useful. Once the book covers are done, I have printed out these fake little pages of Harry Potter. These are all fake, and I pretended to be a successful writer. After cutting them up into the right sizes, I will stick them onto the book. Now, after several days of delicate and painstaking work, I'll give myself a moment to indulge in destruction. Now as I'm cutting out holes on these pages, I'll try to leave some of the paper edges flailing about to make it look a bit more realistic. With that done, I'll erase some of the pencil markers that I had before and sign the whole book off. And with that, the diorama is completed. Now, as I said in the beginning, 17 of you subscribed to the channel, and I cannot express how happy I was to see that number on my YouTube Studio app. So thank you so much for subscribing, you make my day happen. And as for my Harry Potter Hogwarts Legacy diorama, well, there's a lot of things I could have done better here. The front tree, for example, it's just simply too big, and I could have paid more attention to getting the measurements correct, and that's something I'll do so in my later dioramas. Not only that, if you look at the leaves on the tree, in particular the polyfiber mesh that I used, I think I made it too thick and it shows through the leaves, and when I was trying to cover it up using more leaves, the whole tree ended up not looking like the one in Hogwarts Legacy, so definitely something to improve on. The other thing I've also learned with the resin is that my mold wasn't that great, which meant that I had to spend so much time sanding, and if you look closely, it doesn't look as smooth as it should. And as the saying goes, if you had 10 hours to chop down a tree, you would sharpen 9 hours and then chop the last hour. And I think I should have followed with the same mentality. I should have spent more time furnishing a clean mold instead of finishing it up later. As for the trees and little bits of grass and vegetation, definitely somewhere I could improve on, and hopefully it will be something I'll get to learn as I do more and more dioramas. Anyway, I hope you have a good day and cheers!